We bought this dead 1995 Corvette at a junk car auction, and it turned out to be far from junk. Besides an inch thick of dust on the outside, its torch red paint was vibrant and unfaded. The interior super clean, and when we got power to it, it only had 4,500 miles on the clock. And while it didn't start right off the bat, we quickly found the culprit, a tank of fuel turned to varnish. With an $18 off-brand fuel pump, some fresh gas, and a bit of electrical hackery, we got this Corvette up and running in just a few hours. It idles perfectly, and it even drove okay. Well, at slow speeds. The second you try giving it any more than just a little bit of gas, the engine would pretty much stall out. Today, we'll try and figure out and fix whatever's causing this car's problem, but do so as cheaply as possible, as the higher beings don't want us to put this car back on the road. Their intentions are for us to chop it up and turn it to parts. Now, I'll explain all this in a bit, but for now, let's dig a bit deeper into this Corvette's fuel system. If we take a look under our beauty cover, we're going to find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 injectors, and this rail looks like it's only held in place with a few bolts here. So all we gotta do is take those up. We'll disconnect these two fuel lines. That should pop up and out of place. Then we can check and clean these injectors to make sure they're flowing adequately. But before we do that, we're gonna wanna make sure we get all of the fuel that's currently sitting in the rail out. The method I like to do that is by just pulling whichever fuse is the fuel pump. So right here, 10 amps, FP1 and FP2. So like the ZR1 would have 2 fuel pumps. We know this one only has 1 fuel pump. So we're looking 3 rows down for a 10 amp, and you could see right here, 3 rows down, there's our 10 amp, and then there's a blank one next to it because, again, we don't have a second fuel pump. Boom. We'll go ahead. And what we're expecting here is for the car to run for maybe a second or two and then die because it runs out of fuel. Let's see. Yeah, that's exactly what just happened. We'll do it one more time for good measure. Done. If you're ever doing any work on your fuel system, you're gonna need a set of these. These are fuel line quick disconnect tools. These literally cost like $3 on Temu, and they're really simple. You get the one that looks about the right size of your fuel line. You put it over where the quick connect is, and here's the part. You're gonna push up against the quick connect, but then you're gonna push the quick connect up against the tool, and right there it slips in, pulls right off, and you can see we're dry because we relieved all that pressure from the rail. There's 1, there's 2 right there. At the same time I picked up the fuel line tools, I got these slick injector adapters that make it really easy to test and clean the injectors in our Corvette. We're gonna use those in a second, but all this stuff came from Temu, and if you haven't heard of it, imagine your favorite store combined with the dollar store. They have some of the coolest tools and tech at some of the lowest prices you've ever seen. Like, check out this wrench right here. On one side, it has 3 to 8 millimeters. On the other, it has 8 to 17, and it costs just a little bit over $1. I mean, how can you pass this up for $1? Now, everyone needs a good extractor set for those strip nuts and bolts. These are invaluable in your toolbox, but will set you back around $40 to $50 at the hardware store. But on Temu, this 10-piece set was only $11. And I just couldn't help but pick up one of these cool smartwatches with built-in fitness apps, a heart rate monitor, and one of the best games of all time. You'd never guess it costs less than just $30. And these prices all include shipping because everything on Temu ships for free. If you haven't already checked out Temu, all you gotta do is hit my link in the description box, download the app, and then in the search bar, type SamCrack100, which is gonna get you a $100 coupon bundle, plus you're gonna get 90% off my favorite tool, which is this super slick tape measure that's not just a tape measure. It also has a laser measure built in. Normally this would be like a $25 tool, but my viewers are gonna get it for 90% off. All you gotta do is hit that link in the description box. Make sure you search SamCrack100 and score yourself some amazing tool and gadget deals over at Temu. Before I pull the rail up and out, I kind of want to just give this a blow with compressed air to get any of the dirt out. That way it doesn't fall into the engine when the injectors come out. All right, there's this side. Got one last one stuck in place. There we go. That was really successful. Sometimes these injectors get stuck in the head and become a pain in the neck to pull out. If you remember our service records, these are actually the second set that this car has seen. They were replaced once at the dealership, and well, then they sat several years after that. But these things only have like 1,000 miles on them. The problem is they sat for so long with fuel in them, they could very well be gummed up. Now, my friend Alex has this really cool and very fancy tool to clean and flow test injectors. The only problem is that it costs like $500. Now, I hope to buy one of these one day, but for this project, we're just gonna do things the bougie way. These adapters are so cheap and they fit most injector sizes. You can get these along with a controller. I personally just use these few test leads and attach them to a 12-volt battery. You can use anything, even your car battery. Now, basically, the battery will need to send power to the injector opening its solenoid while the adapter feeds in the aerosol. We're using carb cleaner here. We're mimicking these injectors firing, but by running the carb cleaner through them, it should clean and unstick them since they've been sitting with fuel for a very long time. And when you first use these, you've got to find a good balance between the pumping of the aerosol and the tapping of the battery power on and off. Too much fluid pops the injector out. If you just send straight power to the injectors without pulsing things, well, it won't flow. But as you can see, once you get the rhythm down, the injectors start to work just like new. And before we go, reinstall our fuel rail, injectors, and connect these fuel lines. We want to leave these loose for a moment because it will make our lives easier when replacing our fuel filter, which could definitely be another area of restriction in our fuel system causing the drivability issues we're currently having. It just sits right here up on the passenger side. The problem is to get to the top nut to loosen it, you got to go and disconnect all the lines down the car that go all the way to the back. Here we go. Considering my glove and my wrist here, what do you guys think is inside this filter? Oh my God. Look at this. You think that this is filtering much of anything anymore? Maybe there's a possible restriction in this filter. I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure, actually. Look what's in here. All right, we've got this all assembled. All of our injectors, the rails are back in, and all we have to do now is slide our quick connect lines back on. There we go. We can't forget to put our fuel pump fuse back in right here. Now, since we just work with fuel, we're going to want to start by priming the pump by turning the key on and off a few times. And when the car fires over, we're going to jump out and just make sure that there's no fuel leaking. All right, so first off, we want to check here. All right, these all seem to be good. You would see wet spots where these injectors are if we had a problem. I'm surprised this thing is not just firing right over. We never had a problem with it idling. All right, let's try that again. There we go. All right, there we go. We definitely want to check under here where we install the fuel filter, and everything looks dry. If you have a fuel leak after you work on the fuel system, you generally know by either a really strong smell or fuel just pouring out of some area. But so far everything looks pretty good, and it seems to be smoothing out as time goes on. Got an overdrive off. It seems to be idling all right. 3, 2, 1. What is that noise? So after all that cleaning, the car is actually running worse. Now, the fuel system has been our problem all along. We just messed with the fuel system, so I went back and checked all my connections, which look fine, and I installed the fuel pressure gauge back to the rail so we can measure things while we drive. So got it in gear. I'm going to take the overdrive off We're idling really nice like we were before. And we've got good fuel pressure. Let's go ahead, give it some gas and see what happens. Now how come right after I hook up the gauge it drives perfectly? Look at that. I gave it a good amount of throttle. The idle's not changing. That is just so strange. We'll do that again here. We're holding consistent at like 41, 42 PSI. I'm putting my foot down and, oh, look at the fuel pressure drop. Look at the fuel pressure drop. So now I'm gonna give it a lot of gas and then boom. It's starting to run rough, and now we're dying. And look at gone and gone. Okay, so we're definitely having a fuel delivery issue. With the pressure falling, we've got to go back and check our pump. Luckily, this is pretty easy. However, since I just replaced it, whatever is wrong with it is definitely my fault. Now take a look at this. The strainer fell off this pump. Can you see inside here? I don't think the camera's picking this up, but this is the area that sucks the fuel up in it. Look. It's sucked up. Look at this. Big chunks of something in the fuel pump. So the issue wasn't necessarily the pump. It was the fact that the strainer had fallen off and this just started sucking straight gasoline, and with it got some crud that was left over in the fuel tank. So it turns out the problem isn't with the pump at all. It's the fact that there's no strainer on the end of this pump. But if you remember, when I originally installed this in the car, there was a strainer on it. I used the strainer that came with the kit. The problem with that strainer is that it was not the right size for a Corvette fuel tank. In order for things to fit right, you need one of these narrow pre-filters or strainers. And well, the auto parts store happened to have one at just $10. So I'm gonna install this on our existing pump. I'm betting this will be the key that makes our Corvette run pretty much perfect. At least I hope. Sage joined us for our maiden working voyage.
Yeah, my Corvette's not working, so you know.
That's a tough story. We're gonna have to tell them about that. Yeah.
But this will work for now.
All right, let's do it. There it is, it's back.
That's money.
So, can't go too crazy because I'm just on this small road here, but before, even if I just blip the throttle any more than a tad bit, it would just conk right out. But like, look. I think we're back in business. There's no way I got it into the upper RPMs last time, and if you even tried, like right here, whenever the RPMs would go down, it would just hang and then would die. Right now we're idling pretty much perfect. I was always under the impression on a car like this you'd see, you know, between 50, 60 PSI. We're gonna do it again just like we did. We'll start off slow and then we're gonna start opening it up around the corner here. If you wanted this car to run absolutely perfectly, you need to drop the tank, really clean the heck out of it, and reassemble everything. But obviously, I've avoided doing that because I was planning on sending it to a parts dismantler. But the second I said that, I had a ton of outrage. I got a lot of angry emails, a lot of angry comments. I totally understand how you'd be mad at the idea of chopping up a 4,500 mile Corvette here, but there's one issue that's out of my control, and that's the fact that when a car is flooded, and especially done so during a major natural disaster where something along the lines of a few 100,000 cars were totaled in one weekend, well, the big insurance companies blanket issue junk certificates to all of these cars, even cars like this Corvette that maybe didn't really get much or any water in them at all. When they do this, they're shredding up the original title and issuing you a new document that says this car is to be used as parts only, nothing else, and when it's done being used as parts, you need to junk the rest of it because that's what it is. It is junk. even though that's not junk. And I can tell you tens of thousands of those hundreds of thousands of cars are not junk. A lot of them could be put back onto the road. Of course, a lot of them need a good amount of work, but it's done by major insurance companies under pressure from higher beings for a few reasons. Number one, they want to protect the consumer. They want to make sure that someone doesn't take a salvage title out of state, get it washed so it no longer has that branding, and then they can go shop a car that didn't have any major body or structural damage as a nice car. Now, I think there's a bit of validity to that concern, but there's one main issue, and that's a person trying to do something nefarious. If anybody's trying to pass a flood car off to you as not flooded, well, shame on them. They are doing something that is either illegal or at least borderline illegal. So the problem should be placed on them and not necessarily on the fault of the car. The second reason they do this is because during these natural disasters where there is a huge volume of cars that need to be totaled out all at once, they just don't have the staff to go out and put their hands on every single car and deem if it is a total loss or if it should just have a salvage title or what sort of branding the title should carry going forward. It would be way too much of a headache and it would cost them way too much in personnel. So instead, they just issue certificate of destruction titles to everything, not just a car that you might think is cheap like my C4, but also to several $100,000 supercars. The only exception to this rule is small specialty insurance companies. Once in a while, you will see a flood car with a salvage title, and that's because these specialty insurance companies just don't have the volume that the major guys do. Now, I got nearly 40 emails from you guys asking if you could buy this Corvette from me, and it softened me up a bit, and I changed my mind. Yes, you can buy this Corvette from me. The problem is there's a very specific set of restrictions that I laid out in this email, and that eliminates probably about 95% of potential buyers. Where this car could really be used is outside of the United States. A lot of other countries have completely different set of rules when it comes to what is road legal and what is not, and you could probably turn the paperwork I have into a title in an outside country, but the big problem with that is then you got to export a car outside of the United States. You're talking about probably minimum a few $1,000s, which then makes it all that much harder for someone to justify buying out of the country, especially considering there are a lot of C4 Corvettes out there and they are really all over the world. Now, I hope that explains things a bit further to you guys. If you kind of understand my methodology here, be sure to hit that like button. If you're still mad at me for considering parting this out, let me know down in the comments. And if you're not already following me on Instagram, or I've been posting pictures of new projects before they go live here on YouTube, well, visit me here. Hit that link down in the description. Guys, I can't thank each and every one of you enough for watching today, and I'll catch you very soon.